I was invited to give a presentation of the Danish Climate Investment Fund as an example of a public-private partnership. Public-private partnership, which is a fund financing both the renewable projects but also energy efficiency projects. Just as an introduction, IFU is a Danish development finance institution. We have 48 years of investment experience in emerging markets, where we have provided risk capital in projects where Danish companies are investing or have a strong interest. We have invested in over 1,200 projects over the years, and based on our track record at that time, we entered into a dialogue with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs following the COP15 meeting, where one of the conclusions was, as you know, to provide these financing objectives for emerging markets within renewable energy, and the idea of creating a fund, a public-private partnership, emerged, and it took a couple of years to do this, but it's now been in operation for nearly 2 years, and this is a fund which provides risk capital for renewable and energy efficiency projects in emerging markets, where there's a Danish interest. We were able to raise 1.3 billion Danish kroner, out of which more than two-thirds came from Danish institutional investors, Danish pension funds, and a part of it came from Danish government, and a part of it came from IFU, and we were then, of course, fund managers for the fund. And we invest in quite a broad range of projects, both renewable projects, projects producing technology for renewable investments, also energy efficiency projects, and transport projects, always when there's a CO2 reduction component. Now, what I wanted really to touch upon was the challenges we faced in establishing this fund, and talking to Danish institutional investors who had very limited investment track record in emerging markets, apart from some listed investments and a few funds, it was quite obvious that there were a number of barriers for us to establish this fund. Country risk was a primary concern, still is. Political risk when investing in renewable projects where you rely on long-term PPAs. Would governments honor these PPAs down the road? Timing of cash flows, and then of course low returns is also something institutional investors don't like, and they didn't like us that much either to begin with, because we were a government controlled entity. It's a Minister of Foreign Affairs that nominates our CEO and our board of directors. We are not a typical private equity entity where we have a small team working around the clock with all their money and household and dog and everything invested into the project. And basically they were afraid that our interests were not aligned, that we would follow government political priorities on the climate agenda, and they were of course bought into this, but where return on investment was of course an important element for them to justify this investment. So what was it we tried to do? The country risk, we mentioned that there were some guarantee schemes. We've not used that yet, actually, but we also but we said we could use it, so that gave some comfort. But also from our 48 years of investments, it was seldom that a project failed due to country risk. There were other elements which were more important. Political risk was also, as mentioned before, a big issue, and they're working with official development finance institution gave them comfort because, as we are owned by the Danish government and also work with other development finance institutions, international finance institutions, that gave them comfort in reducing the political risk component. Then, of course, we set it up as a private equity type of fund with a 10-year time horizon, and this was a precondition. The government agreed to give a preferred return to the private investors on their investment. That is, there's no first loss risk. We share loss equally, but the private investors will have a preferred return up to 6%. And thereafter, the government, the Danish government, for their funding, will actually have an increased part of the cash flow, and then have a higher upside than the private investors. So it's sort of a balanced approach, but the private investors will have a preferred return up to the 6%, which suited a pension fund. It was a condition that a separate investment committee was established for the climate fund, and actually we managed to get the two CEOs of the main institutional investors from two Danish pension funds, Pension Denmark, which is they finance this building as well. The CEO, he is in the investment committee, and also the CEO of PKA and other large Danish institutional investors. They sit in the investment committee, and this was important for us because the type of projects they were looking at really needed a high-level management approach where they were able to accept investments which are not very typical for them. We were afraid that if lower-ranking executives of the pension funds, they would say no to the investments because they did not all look like the kind of risk they were like. It would be easier for the CEOs to accept these risks, and also give them a better understanding of these markets. And this I think we have achieved to a great extent. EFU, actually, our track record within climate investments was quite good. We had invested more than 2 billion Danish kroner in these kind of investments, and had a return of nearly 12% IRR on our investments. And this is what we then also promised we would achieve in the fund. So I think we were able to achieve some alignment of interest, even though we're not the typical fund structure. And I think the experience so far has been positive. I think the good news is that the projects are economically viable without subsidies. We feel there's plenty of capital out there now. Goldman Sachs was mentioned. Of course, this is big news, but also from the Danish pension funds, at least they're managing 4,000 billion Danish kroner, and I think there's ample of financing for these kind of projects. I think the barriers and the obstacles we face are that a lack of supply of good projects. And this is due to many things, but one thing is that there are lack of competent, qualified developers in emerging markets, which are able to carry a project from concept to financial close, and this is a big problem. We have tried to remedy that by investing actually together with a Danish developer company, which has been quite successful in Europe, to set up a company called Nordic Power Partners, where which aim is to develop projects in emerging market using their experience in these technologies and our emerging market experience, and that has proven somewhat successful. But I think this is a big problem, and I think also providing the right political framework conditions for these investments in emerging markets is a must. I think if you get the framework conditions in place, financing will flow much more easily to the energy sector in many emerging markets. But these are the challenges that we need to overcome, and I think we have actually quite optimistic about being able to invest these funds in a good way, and also be able to raise fund number 2. We have done now energy efficiency. You could say it's a topic of today. We've only done one investment in energy efficiency because I think this is actually extremely challenging. And ESCO, we set up a company in Malaysia doing energy efficiency on some public buildings in Malaysia as a pilot project, going together with a Danish developer in this field with a lot of experience, and I think this is actually a very good example of a field where competencies and developer experience is lacking. As financial investors, we need the competent technical partners which are able to provide to us the guarantees that the savings actually will materialize, and that and not, of course, taking into account that not increased energy is consumed, but that the savings actually will materialize, and this is a challenge. But we hope actually this project will emerge